Good evening. This is the CBS Evening News. I'm Forrest Sawyer. The lives of 4 hostages, 3 of them Americans, are hanging on the edge of another deadline tonight in Lebanon. This time, their kidnappers are threatening to execute the 4 hostages by tomorrow. In Damascus, Mark Phillips has the story.
The American administration to be responsible.
Alan Steen, one of the American hostages, threatened with execution tomorrow on a videotape released by his captors today.
Just a reminder, goofing around will be useless.
He was reading a letter from his abductors warning that if 400 Palestinian prisoners in Israel are not released tomorrow, he and 3 other hostages will be killed.
February 9th is the last day to release them. If they don't get released, our fate will be execution. And the Islamic Jihad, the liberation of Palestine, is serious about the time it's set.
I hope they will not do it.
For Nabi Berri, the militia leader who has offered to free an Israeli prisoner he is holding, if the hostages and the Arabs in Israeli jails are also freed, there has been no sign his proposal is working. Negotiations with the Israelis or with parties representing, have you had any communication other than the news conference yesterday?
No.
And another ominous sign from Beirut today, a picture of another American hostage, Edward Austin Tracy, held by yet another group since last October. The accompanying letter said that Terry Waite, the British negotiator turned hostage, was carrying a concealed electronic transmitter. In this way, the letter claimed the various groups of kidnappers Waite visited could be located. The steady stream of reports this weekend that Waite had been freed and handed over to Syrian authorities has thus far proved groundless. In Damascus this evening, Syrian sources have told CBS News they have heard nothing about Terry Waite's release. In the words of one official, if he were free, I'd know about it, and I don't. Mark Phillips, CBS News, Damascus.
The question now is, how should the U.S. respond to the death threats against the American hostages? White House correspondent Jacqueline Adams has been following that story.
As the Beirut kidnappers' deadline approaches, U.S. officials say they won't give in to terrorist threats. Still smarting from the failed Iran arms for hostages scheme, officials are deliberately avoiding even the appearance of deal-making.
We'll respond as the situation merits. I'm not going to try to forecast it, but we do have a clear and basically good set of policies on terrorism. But one thing I think you just can't do is start jumping whenever there are threats around.
Though U.S. officials have scaled back their forces in the Mediterranean, Defense Secretary Weinberger told the BBC that the American military presence may increase if the situation in Lebanon worsens. The aircraft carrier Nimitz remains in the eastern Mediterranean, and even though sailors aboard the carrier Kennedy are on shore leave in Israel, officers have been told to keep in touch with their shore station. Across the Arabian Peninsula, a 12-ship battle group headed by the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk is maneuvering in the Arabian Sea, within striking distance of Iran. Whether or not U.S. troops fire a shot, released hostage David Jacobson believes they've already served a useful purpose.
I think a demonstration of force was necessary to let them know that we are concerned and that we will act.
American officials admit they can't anticipate the kidnappers' actions. They don't want to tip their hand, said one official, but they're taking the death threat seriously, and they're prepared to act. Jacqueline Adams, CBS News, the White House.
These new developments in Lebanon place Israel squarely in the middle, and the Israelis are choosing their words carefully. Bob Simon in Tel Aviv reports.
Israeli officials say they are talking to Washington about the hostage situation, but have not been asked to do anything. They say they feel no pressure from the United States and believe that on this one, Israel will not be held responsible.
We weren't approached until now by anybody. So, I mean, again, I wouldn't like to give answers in there independent of the realities of our life.
It's clear tonight that Israel would release many of its Arab prisoners if it could get back the few Israeli soldiers held in Lebanon. There are contacts between Israel and Lebanese factions about a possible exchange, but Jerusalem is extremely skeptical that the Lebanese can deliver. In Jerusalem, Israeli officials expressed outrage about something else today, about the publication in the Washington Post of a memorandum which outlined a briefing Vice President Bush received last July from an Israeli official. The memo reveals that the Israelis were dealing with Iranian radicals, not, as President Reagan claimed, with moderates. Israelis said today this kind of leak makes it difficult to work with Americans on sensitive matters. Israelis well briefed on the Iran affair said the body of the memo is true. They were dealing with radicals in Tehran for release of the hostages. They were dealing with moderates for long-term strategic objectives. As outlined in the memo, the Israelis were acting as a support team for the Americans, enabling Washington to steer clear of logistical parts of the operation, in effect, keeping American hands clean. Officials in Jerusalem said tonight the memo reveals an intelligent, well-constructed operation. We have nothing to be ashamed of, they said. What is a shame is that the Americans can't keep a secret. Bob Simon, CBS News, Tel Aviv.
The weather made news today. The Midwest and Great Lakes got hit with a winter storm. Strong winds in Chicago sent waters from Lake Michigan crashing ashore. Thousands of homes lost electricity for a time. That's the CBS Evening News. I'm Forrest Sawyer. Good night.
This is CBS.